We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
You just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. Time to review all of Week 6, Sam.
Almost all. 2 games tonight.
Yeah, it's always throwing us off with the double Monday night games. We'll get into all the action, but first, a quick note from our friends over at Monkey Knife Fight. It's an incredible deal. All first-time depositors at Monkey Knife Fight that put at least $20 into their account while using promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's right, $40 of value for just $20, and you get the opportunity to turn that 20 into even more money playing daily fantasy and prop games. It's over at Monkey Knife Fight. So go to Monkey Knife Fight, deposit your $20, use the promo code PFF today, and receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. A whole year for just $20, $40 value, plus you can win even more. And then you can also go to pristineauction.com. They're sponsoring the PFF NFL podcast today. Check out their daily auctions with $1 starting bids on over 8,000 football items up for auction. Pristine Auction guarantees authenticity on every product, and you can use the promo code PFF there for $10 off your first invoice. We're currently giving away a signed Jerry Rice jersey. Just rate and review the podcast. We'll be choosing a winner next week. Jerry Rice jersey. Go check it out. So leave some sort of contact wherever you rate and review the podcast. Sam, let's get right into the Week 6 action. I just love Monday mornings here.
Yeah,
I love it. There's just so much to take in, so many new takes to spew out to the public. So let's get right into it. We're going in some kind of order based off the 1 o'clock games. The Washington football team and the New York Giants. The Giants are on the board, my friend. They have a win. And look, if your favorite team is in the tank for Trevor sweepstakes, we're going to talk a lot about maybe the future and what to build around. And both of these teams are very much in it.
Riverboat Ron went for the win at the end and got Kyle Allen. See, the analytics, they can't take into account that your quarterback's Kyle Allen. And when he rolls to the left, he's just going to
They can't. They can't account for that.
Can't account for it.
There's been a lot of this, blanketed analytics can't do this or that lately. And we'll get into some more of it, in the next game, Houston and Tennessee. But
in case it wasn't clear, by the way, I'm being facetious. In no way, if you've got one play to win the game or not, take it. Always.
I don't know if it's always, but.
Well, all right, one play, in the case of a 2-point conversion, one play from the 2-yard line to win the game, take it.
I mean, I'm a fan of that. We'll talk about it in the Houston-Tennessee game. I'm a fan of being one play away from victory.
I mean, if it's 4th and 18 from your own 10-yard line, maybe not. But if it's one play from your opponent's 2-yard line to win the game, right? Your options are kick the extra point, which is not a certainty anymore, since they moved it back.
Right.
Kick the extra point, play for overtime, where your quarterback is still Kyle Allen, and now you have to execute a drive to go somewhere, or one play to put up 2 and win the game. Why would you anything but try and win the game?
We got a full Kyle Allen experience. Awesome touchdown to almost tie the game. A couple big-time throws in there. The turnover-worthy plays were poor. Misreads underneath, fumble. Daniel Jones, he was grading better than his stats early in the season. That's kind of tapered off recently. So I think, both teams continue to be in that massive question mark stage, but credit the Giants for the win. James Bradbury gets a pick, continues to play pretty well.
Yeah, Bradbury is playing well. I thought Jones played okay as well. He's in that bucket of quarterbacks that have almost no help. I mean, his receivers are actually halfway decent, so it's not as bad as some situations, say the other New York situation. But he's in that kind of bucket, right, of quarterbacks that definitely are not being elevated by what's around them, and yet he's playing okay. It's definitely, he's not playing as well as he did earlier in the season, where he was legitimately grading significantly better than his overall numbers. But every game, I come away kind of impressed by Daniel Jones, even his bad plays notwithstanding. And even in this game, I mean, I guess it was a razor-thin margin anyway, but, Jones had the big 50-yard scamper that gave them a big play. He is responsible for pretty much anything good that's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, I think since entering the NFL, I knew he had some athleticism, but I think he's got a good feel as a scrambler as well. I think he does a nice job there. So that's what I've been maybe most impressed with. That and his ability to make big-time throws, even though they're far less than it seems for a guy that has the Danny Dimes nickname. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's tough sledding over there with the Giants, but
they got to win.
Celebrate your win, I think. Would you rather the win, or would you rather Trevor Lawrence?
I mean, I think you always want a win, right? Nobody wants to be the 0-16 Detroit Lions. Nobody. You just don't want that. So you want the win, and then you want to stop. But
my whole thing
the problem with the Giants is the Giants are close to having seen enough from not to keep you from Trevor Lawrence, but so if you get the number 1 overall pick, you're taking Trevor Lawrence, right? But if you're in the middle of your crappy season right now, the Jets, the only thing in the left for this season is the salvation of Trevor Lawrence. The Giants might actually have a future that is Trevor Lawrence less with Daniel Jones in a way that I don't think is an option for the Jets anymore. So
why?
Why?
With Sam Darnold?
Yeah.
You think Daniel Jones has a better shot of success than Sam Darnold?
I think Daniel Jones has shown significantly more than Sam Darnold at this point.
Oh, I don't know. Darnold's still younger, isn't he?
He's going to be younger than everybody for the next 5 years.
As long as he's still younger than everybody.
It's not look, I'm just saying that can you envisage a scenario for the remainder of this season whereby Sam Darnold convinces you that you don't need Trevor Lawrence?
No.
Right.
Daniel Jones is going to do the same?
So I can see a scenario whereby he prevents you from getting Trevor Lawrence, at which point it's kind of the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
It is. I'm saying if
Sam
Darnold
is going to have a 4-game stretch where he grades at 85, and you're like, look at this, he's turned a corner.
And they'll go 0-4 in that time. If you gave Daniel Jones, or if you gave the Giants the number 1 overall pick right now, of course you take Trevor Lawrence, right? But their season still has some vague hope to it in a way that the Jets doesn't. The Jets are miserable and just on course for that number 1 pick.
We will revisit this when Sam Darnold has his 4-game stretch.
The Giants suck, but they can still win the division.
Well, there's something to that.
Right.
That's an NFC East issue, not an AFC East issue.
But that's what I'm saying. Daniel Jones could go on a run and put them in pole position in the division in the space of 3 games. The Jets could have that run and it wouldn't make any difference. They'd still be over.
Maybe this is the start of it. The Giants making their run in the NFC East. Let's go to the AFC South. Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans. This was – I used to make fun of the Big 12. Now the SEC doesn't play any defense. So let's say it was an SEC game with no defense.
Nobody in college plays defense.
Yeah, I think Corona killed everybody's defense this offseason.
No, it didn't. Nobody's ever played defense in college.
I'm saying NFL and college defense is worse than ever.
Oh, NFL,
all of it.
yeah.
NFL too. So 42-36, the Tennessee Titans win. It was a back and forth, incredible game. It did feel kind of like Deshaun Watson against the world from a Texans standpoint. From a Tennessee standpoint, Ryan Tannehill, when the grades come out, I think is going to be up in that 90-plus elite territory again, based off of back-to-back games, likely. over 90. It's not official yet. Likely over 90. And they're actually duplicating in the last few games what happened last year.
Well, certainly this game was almost exactly that. Like Tannehill goes back to being the 90-plus all-pro caliber quarterback, and then Derrick Henry goes off at the end. Like this was last year in a game. It's easier to do that when you're playing the Texans, who aren't very good. For like 3/4 of this game, it was going exactly the way I thought it was, which is, hey, Tennessee are actually quite good. Houston aren't. Remember, last week they played a Jacksonville team whose secondary was stuffed full of undrafted players and 7th-round rookies because everyone was hurt. It's like, oh, hey, look, the Deshaun Watson to Brandon Cooks connection is finally bearing some fruit. It's like, well, yeah, that'll happen when you're facing terrible players. So I was kind of expecting this to suddenly the gloss comes off that again, and we remember that, actually they're not that good. And then Tennessee began to implode and sort of throw the ball in the direction of Houston, made it a game, lost the lead, and almost lost the entire game. And it became this wild shootout until Derrick Henry took over at the end. How demoralizing must it be if you're a defensive back getting outrun over 94 yards in a straight line by Derrick Henry?
Man, that's like classic Derrick Henry, right?
Yeah.
It feels like all season teams have done a pretty good job of bottling him up. And yes, it's demoralizing. He's really fast for a monster.
That's the thing.
But like all season, he's been bottled up, and then he just gets unleashed. And as much as we hammer against the run game and all that stuff, there are a few running backs when you don't want to go, let me just give him 25 carries in case at some point he breaks it. But Henry's kind of that guy when you stick with him and stick with him and stick with him. He's not likely, but he's more likely than others to create those big plays like he did, and then gets the game winner as well.
Right. It's funny. There were people like trying to jump into my mentions after that and were like, oh, you thought Derrick Henry was going to regress, did you? Like, that was the first game this season where he's kind of been like that. Let's wind it in a little bit. Like, Derrick Henry has regressed this season from what he did last year and then went off against the Texans, who, again, let's remember, it's the Texans.
Houston's run defense is absolutely putrid.
Yes.
I am so disappointed in one of my favorite players in the league, Zach Cunningham. He just signed the monster deal. I feel like I'm saying this every week. I don't talk too much about linebackers, but, man, he's got just some disastrous games this year so far, including this one. And the one thing he's supposed to be doing well, Cunningham, is play the run. And it's just all bad. The Houston defense needs a complete overhaul.
This was the first halfway decent game for J.J. Watt, but I mean, I was talking about J.J. Watt in terms of, hey, I know he's been injured, but what we've seen from him working his way back from injury in the last couple of years has been really kind of close to where he was when he was like defensive player of the year. It's just that now you compare that to Aaron Donald, and there's always like the bar has been moved, right? But he hasn't been playing well at all this season. Now, okay, nobody else has around him, so it's not like he has help. But, if you're J.J. Watt playing at the peak of your powers or anything near it, you should be making a bigger impact than he's been making this season.
Yeah, I agreed. And he's the only guy there, though.
I know,
the
but
only guy.
But at some point, does that even matter? Like your job, your life as J.J. Watt and Aaron Donald, for that matter, has always been about like winning one-on-one battles and just wrecking what's in front of you. You can do that regardless of whether there's help around you. Like your whole life is about shooting a gap and causing problems before anything of significance can be like platooned against you.
Right.
It shouldn't matter that there isn't other people around you making a ton of plays. Like you should still be able to destroy what's in front of you in a way he isn't this year.
So the Texans, really quick, their offensive line from a pass protection standpoint was fantastic. They kept Watson clean for the most part. When Watson's under pressure, a lot of it's his own doing. Watson played really well, made some really incredible throws down the field, first touchdown, tight window in the end zone, all of that stuff. I don't think the Texans are terrible.
No.
Defensively, they are.
Yeah.
But they are also in this rut of when something goes right, something else doesn't. Right? And it's like, wow, now the offensive line is playing better, as they did at times last year. Watson plays an incredible game, and the defense can't make a stop. Right. And the defense is just terrible across the board. Offensively, a few weeks ago with the Texans, it was like, well, Watson makes a great throw, it gets dropped. When Watson has an open receiver, he's missing it. I still don't want to overrate how bad the Texans are. They do need a lot more talent on that team, but it's also this feeling of when one thing goes right, something else goes wrong. And that's not like a thing that you just you just hope that it all comes together. I don't know what you do to fix that in particular.
Deshaun Watson is good enough whereby they're going to be in most games, because that's what having a good quarterback does for you. Is it's very difficult. It's your line with the Joe Burrow thing, right? He's unblowoutable. Like, it's very hard to blow out a team that has a really good quarterback because fundamentally they're going to put you in. Damn it, I did it again.
Fundamentally,
because they're going to put you
again a few times too.
They're going to put you in pretty much every game, regardless of what's going on. But it's like it's the difference between being in every game and actually capable of winning them. Like, the Texans are not good, and as I was saying in the preview, their schedule's not easy. Like, it may be easier than the first 4 games, which was a disaster, but their schedule doesn't get easy for the rest of the season. Like, they are going to be in a lot of tough games against some good teams, and that means they're going to be behind the 8 ball. Like, you're going to need A, Watson to play well, and B, a few breaks to bounce your way, and so far they haven't been.
All right, 2 things to wrap up in this game here. I want to know if the Titans are legit. We'll get to that in a second. And most importantly, the decision by interim head coach Romeo Crennel to go for 2 while up 7. Okay, so it's about a minute left in the game. Texans score a touchdown. They go up 7. And one of the common things that the computer folk have been saying is when you're up 7, the traditional way of doing things is you kick the extra point, you go up 8.
Yeah.
Great. It's now the other team's chasing a touchdown plus a 2-point conversion. That's uncomfortable for the offense. Great. However, the computer folk have brought up the point that if you have 7, if you do go for 2, you get to 9, and the game's all but over. You're 1 play away from essentially ending the game. And your worst case scenario is you're still up 7. The other team still has to drive the length of the field, score a touchdown, extra point, you go to overtime, and you play it out. When analytical moves go wrong, the analytics gets trashed.
Yes.
So was this the right or the wrong move by the Houston Texans going for 2, up 7?
I haven't actually checked what the overall numbers say. My intuition says it's probably going to end up being about a wash, right? Because effectively you're comparing your chances of converting a 2-point conversion with their chances of converting a 2-point conversion, right? Which should be more or less the same when you factor in
and our numbers would factor in the quarterback, which I think the traditional ones don't.
Which should make it more or less the same, right? Because Watson, Tannehill, whatever. It's going to be close. Generally, I am always going to be in favor of a strategy that ends the game with a play. Particularly, unless you are absolutely staggeringly inept in offense, right? If you have if you have Joe Flacco, you're the 0-4 Jets, you haven't scored a single point, you haven't actually converted a third down until did they even convert one in that game? Nobody in that game converted one until the end of the third quarter. Anyway, unless that is your scenario and you're like, there is no way we're converting this 2-point conversion. Any other scenario, I say you've got one shot, it puts it to a point of 9 points. It's so hard to get an onside kick in today's NFL. You basically ended the game. If you give yourself one play to end the game, I am generally going to be in favor of that decision. So this one, the Riverboat Ron, go for 2, win the game. Mike Zimmer, go for 2, or go for the 4th down conversion and essentially end the game. I'm always I'm going to have your back for that decision. Even if it's like the numbers marginally say kick it, I'm still in favor of take the shot, end it right there, then and there. And I'll go for that here.
I'm going to lean that way as well.
I stand with Romeo.
I do think when you're making these decisions, though, here's the thing. You're changing percentage points in win probability. Right. It's not like the go for it decision. The difference is, though, like when you execute something, there's sometimes a big win to be had there. But the difference when you're making the decision, knowing that there's a success and a failure rate, you're making a marginal gain or loss here.
I think part of the reason this causes problems is because it gets presented in absolute terms, right? You should 100% go for it here. But the reason you should 100% go for it here is because all the numbers say that you gain a marginal extra addition of win percentage points by doing so.
Right.
Therefore, it is the right call. But it's not to say that like every time you go for it there, it wins. It's just that if you do that 1,000 times, you make out slightly better going for it every time than you do not going for it every time. But I think what causes problems in the brains of, the football people is it's like, well, it didn't work. So it kind of been the right decision to go for it. The nerds didn't factor in that the left guard is having a rough day and blah, blah, blah. Like that, I think just the way it's presented in terms of you have to go for it here it causes issues. Whereas really what it's saying is, look, it's close. It's not a slam dunk either way. There are, decisions where it's like a massive no-brainer one way or the other, right? But this is not one of them. It's close, at which point, yeah, you probably should, but we should probably all be a little bit more careful about how we actually structure the phrasing around these conversations.
Here's why it's close, right? If you go for, I like the idea, one play away, you go for it, you win. Then the downside is you don't get it. You're still up 7. You have a chance to stop the other team. The Texans have a chance to stop the Titans, which they didn't do. Then the Titans have to kick an extra point, which is not a gimme
anymore, yeah,
to tie it up. And then you go to overtime, and still, if both teams equal, it's still a 50-50 chance to win, right? So the ultimate thing, people were calling this a failure as soon as they went into overtime. Right. So they were like, well, you failed. You let the Titans take you to overtime. But built into this equation, so to speak, is the fact that if you do go to overtime, you still have a chance to win. The ultimate result is not avoid overtime or avoid embarrassment or get second guessed. The ultimate goal is to win. So it's all pointed to what are your chances to win the football game, even if it feels like this decision failed and maybe you gave the other team more opportunities, you still have a chance to win. Ultimately, everything went against the Texans. Had they kicked the extra point and gotten it, again, not a gimme, you're up 8. The Titans still go down the length of the field, and then it comes down to, as you said, their 2-point conversion to tie it up and go to overtime versus your 2-point conversion, which happened initially. So maybe overtime it is a wash. Either way, the Texans had over a 90% chance, I think, to win this game, and they blew it. And then credit the Titans. How good are the Titans? What do you want to say?
It's also not one of those scenarios whereby your decision essentially changes how aggressive they have to be by making them need a touchdown, right? Either way, they need the touchdown, so they're going to be as aggressive as is possible late in the game. It's not one of the ones where your decision essentially actually affects A, the percentages, but B, by the way you're forcing them to play if you make or don't make. So, yeah, so as for the Titans, I think they are for real, but kind of under the radar coming out of this game is they lost Taylor Lewan to, I think, a torn ACL.
Yeah.
He's going to be done for the season. That's a pretty significant blow.
After having Taylor Lewan and Jack Conklin, solid right tackle last season, and now you've got the Dennis Kellys of the world. I mean,
When I got neither of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be an issue for the Titans going forward. The AFC, though, it's deep now with the Titans and Steelers and Bills and lurking around the Ravens and Chiefs.
The
right?
AFC is the new NFC.
Well, the NFC is still pretty good, too, I think. I think everything's wide open and crazy.
The NFC has the East. So
the NFC's got some weaknesses up. Speaking of the NFC East, let's go to the Baltimore Ravens and the Philadelphia Eagles. We thought this would be close, then it looked like it wasn't close, and then it became close again.
Yeah.
30-28, Baltimore survives.
Yesterday felt like this weird week where if you looked at the games at a certain point, really quite late into them, you could be convinced that things were going a completely different way to the way they actually ended up. So this was one of those ones where saying, well, Carson Wentz kind of looks fixed, at which point it's good news for the Eagles. It might not matter in this game, but, take the over because Carson Wentz will be dealing, all these kinds of things. And then they were just getting blown to bits. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, that didn't go so well. The Eagles are just getting stomped. And then they made it close in the end.
There was just a lot. There's a lot of fascinating storylines, I think, in this game. For the most important one, though, is Brandon Graham. I just want to get this on record. Mm-hmm. We've had a 4-year running bet on Brandon Graham's sacks. Right? So 2017, he had over 10. He had 12. I won.
Yeah.
Last year, 7. So I have over 10. You have under 10.
Yes.
Last year, 7. Sorry, 2018, 7. 2019, 9. I just want to say thanks to Lamar Jackson running into 2 sacks, including one for 0 yards that counted as a sack. Brandon Graham has 5 through 6 weeks.
He is halfway to you getting lunch after 6 weeks.
We've auto-renewed this bet.
Yeah.
It's clear? Okay. Because last year I don't think I reminded you about the bet because he was, not doing so hot.
Yeah.
But his pass rush grade right now is the worst it's been since 2013. But Brandon Graham has 5 sacks through 6 games, so
there would be
that's all that
something
matters.
kind of fitting about that if you just had this is the season that essentially highlighted his demise in terms of age. He's finally done. His numbers have fallen off, but he lucks into like 12 sacks.
Yeah, for perspective, in 2016, Brandon Graham had a 91.4 pass rush grade. That is elite. 6 sacks.
Yeah.
This year, pass rush grade in the 60s. 5 sacks in 6 weeks.
He has had a career of generating fewer sacks than he generates pressures by a massive degree.
He's going to finish his career with the full Bud Dupree
That's what I mean.
mediocre pass rush grade in 15 sacks.
Or the Vic Beasley season where he gets like 8 cleanup sacks.
I'll take it. There was so many things that happened in this game. I thought first off, the Ravens, they took Marlon Humphrey when they were playing man coverage. They matched him up against Zach Ertz before Ertz got hurt. Marlon Humphrey just had what a ridiculous game he had all over the place. He had a busted coverage that led to a huge play. He had the Tillman peanut punch for a fumble, which apparently is his thing now. You ever play a video game and you just overdo it with a certain button, or you play Madden and you just overdo the spin move or something like that? Every time Humphrey tries to go in for a tackle, he's trying to peanut punch the whole thing.
I mean, I think it's a smart thing.
I think it's great. It's funny that's how much he's emphasizing things. And he also dipped the edge on Jack Driscoll for a sack. Humphrey was all over the place, both good and bad.
I think Humphrey I think he's insanely underrated. And I was writing this when he got his big extension. I think he gets screwed by what they ask him to do in terms of he doesn't get the credit as a sort of the next Stephon Gilmore, a number 1 shutdown cover corner on the perimeter, because they keep getting injuries and ask him to do other things. And he's like, all right, sure, yeah, I'll do it, whatever it takes to win. And he does things that don't necessarily make him look great most of the time, or at least don't necessarily give him phenomenal numbers. And it helps the team. It makes them better. But we think of the best thing a cornerback can do is be a Stephon Gilmore, a guy on the edge who shuts down a number 1 receiver and plays man coverage all game long. If you're playing in the slot or you're doing all these things that you just mentioned, it's nice and they're great and they're highlight plays, but true number 1 doesn't do that. You wouldn't see Deion Sanders in there peanut punching the ball. That's what lesser guys do because they have to make up for the fact that they can't cover as well. I think Humphrey might actually be one of the best man cover guys in the NFL, but because he plays in the slot where you get a 2-way go and you're giving up short catches constantly and you have to do all this dirty work, we don't actually see that much of it and appreciate it.
Yeah, it's not exact. Remember back in 2009 and 10 when Darrelle Revis was that guy, and Defensive Player of the Year came down to him and Charles Woodson.
Yeah.
And it's not – Humphrey doesn't play the Charles Woodson role. Woodson was legitimately one of the early guys playing linebacker / safety / corner, doing it all. Humphrey isn't at that level, I don't think, of versatility. But that was the debate. Woodson's going to get in a bunch of tackles, play the run, play the slot, play zone, play man, do it all, versus Revis just locking up the one guy on the outside. Humphrey has elements of that to his game. Like I said, playing, press coverage, pressing against Zach Ertz in this particular game, which I think brings up another issue with the Eagles. That they don't have receivers that you're afraid of to the point where the Ravens are taking their best cover guy and putting him on your tight end. As much as Wentz had his first 2 big-time throws were dropped. I mean, this is like I was saying with the Texans, when good stuff happens on one side, bad stuff is happening somewhere else. And the Eagles, they crept back into it, but, man, they just felt overmatched for much of the game.
Yeah, I mean, they are. It ended up the way we said it was going to go heading into the game. It just got there by a weird route of getting their ass kicked for most of the game. But, Wentz, I think, is fundamentally back. He's not going to be 2017 MVP caliber season Wentz, and I honestly don't know if that guy's ever going to come back. That was just a weird run of unsustainable things. He was that 2017 season, he was off the charts on all the absurdly unpredictable, volatile, unstable metrics, right? Just nuts in a way that was never going to happen long term. So that's probably not going to happen. But he's back to being pretty decent, or at least a wildly volatile guy capable of big plays. But he has no offensive line and no receivers, pretty much. And that's a problem. Like Torrey Smith was on some TV basically. Look, no quarterback plays well if he doesn't have either protection or receivers. If you have one or the other, we can talk. But if you have neither of them, you're screwed.
The pass protection was rough in this one too. Calais Campbell was dominant up front for the Ravens. And, man, we always talked last year about that positionless defense from the Ravens. I know they ended up ultimately giving up 28 points, but it was a couple of coverage busts in there that kind of screwed them over, right? I mean, they just make life difficult on offenses other than the Chiefs, essentially.
Which, by the way, the more of these games the Ravens have, the more insane that game appears to be. Because it's not like the Chiefs are just – I mean, we know the offense was good. It was more that the Ravens' defense confuses the living crap out of every quarterback it plays and every offense it plays because it messes with protection calls and all those kinds of things. The Chiefs, it was like they knew what was coming. Like they had the answers. You know, like if you're playing Madden, right, and you see what the other guy is calling – and you can make the adjustments and kill it, right? It's like they were seeing what the Ravens were calling on a play before it came, and we're like, oh, you're sending this blitz? Well, then here's where we're going with the ball. And it was easy. Everybody else doesn't know what's coming and just implodes in the face of it.
On the other side, when Baltimore offensively, in my notes here, Eagles linebackers are a train wreck. I think all of their middle, they have been for much of the year anyway, but when you go up against Lamar and what he brings to the table.
That'll highlight it,
Yes. Still, the Baltimore passing offense feels way more like we defended Lamar so much coming out saying he doesn't just run around and make plays and all that stuff. This year, though, feels like it's way more of that than him comfortably making throws from the pocket. Is this a lack of dynamic playmakers catching up to them? Is it defenses adjusting? Is it the fact that they don't have the dominant run game that we talked about in the preview show? They're just not the same run game that they were a year ago. I know they keep winning, other than the Chiefs game. They keep winning, but this is not the same Ravens offense from last year, and I don't know how concerning that is going forward as the season unfolds. You still have 2 more Steelers games and all that stuff that, still to come.
Yeah, it's going to become a problem for seeding, I think. Long term, I don't think it's a problem because I think what we're seeing is a reflection of that there is an underlying problem that the blocking up front is not as good as it was a year ago because Marshall Yanda, a Hall of Famer, walks away and you replace him with somebody that isn't a Hall of Famer. And, how good that interior ends up being is, I think, still a fluid thing. But right now it's definitely a downgrade over what it was a year ago. So something is not going to be as good as it was last season. Also, Lamar's been injured and he's clearly not 100%. And I know he's like taking off and making scramble plays and all those kinds of things. He's still able to play, but I don't think they want him to be or to do the things that he's been doing when the offense is 100% yet. They're trying to protect him a little bit in terms of what they ask him to do until he is 100% healthy, and then they can go back to more of that run-focused scheme. And then I think there's a degree of, last week we were talking about how they basically treated that game against the Bengals as a scrimmage, right? We know we don't have to deploy Lamar in that way. Let's just try and pass. I think they are consciously trying to improve that area of the offense because ultimately this team wants to be a Super Bowl team. They know that at some point they're going to have to knock off the Steelers and they're going to have to beat the Chiefs in the postseason. Like, those are the teams they are focusing on, at which point Lamar has to have that club in his bag. Like, you have to be able to, all right, we're down 14. The offensive game plan has gone out the window. You need to drop back and pass and chase the game a little bit. Right now, there's no evidence that this team is actually capable of executing that against a really good team. I think they know that, and they at least want to work on that in the course of games that they think they're winning anyway. So I think it's sort of 2 or 3 things all lumped together are causing this offense to not look the same as it did a year ago.
But they're messing with my fantasy team, Sam.
That's unfortunate.
And a lot of fantasy owners are very upset
that
if they have Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, or Gus Edwards, they don't know what to get every single week.
Well, yeah. To be honest, if you're a fantasy owner and you're messing with the Baltimore backfield, that's kind of on you.
Yeah, but it was okay last year. when I had Mark Ingram.
Yeah.
It was okay. Now I doubled down on him. It's not good for me. No, I wonder if it's just they are passing more. And this is the whole part of passing being more efficient. Passing sometimes is uncomfortable. Like your completion percentage isn't great or what you can have a bad passing game is still more efficient than a good running game over time. Now a great running game like they had last year, great. That's different. But maybe that's part of it. They're pivoting to more of a pass-heavy approach. And look, they still ran the ball a ton yesterday. But the uncomfortable pass game is still going to be more efficient than a good running game. And even though it doesn't feel great, you're still going to score more points over time.
But it affects the balance of the way this offense works. Like we were talking about, one of the reasons Lamar looks so good as a passer last year is because what he does in the run game and the run game period opens things up for him as a passer, right? He is his own best weapon in terms of what he does. His threat on the ground makes his own life easier in the passing game. But when you work away from that, when you pull back from that stuff, suddenly it doesn't open up the spaces it used to in the passing game. And it's like a self-defeating circle, right? Edging towards the passing game actually diminishes the effect or the effectiveness of the passing game because it was the threat of the run when it was so good that opened up all those spaces.
Right. I agreed. There is a dependency there that, I think the Ravens still want to get back to. Let's go to the Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings. I picked the Falcons to win this somewhere. I don't know if it was on this podcast or not.
I think it was.
Did I do it here?
Yeah.
When I put in my official picks, I did.
I was on the live show this week, and I apparently hit about face from the preview podcast because I picked the Falcons. Everyone else has been snake bit by the Falcons and betting on them. It's like, I'm not touching them. I was like, no, the Vikings. Yeah, this is ride the Falcons. This makes a lot of sense. And it turns out it did. But apparently I didn't. Apparently I was the other way on the preview podcast. So.
Well, I mean, look, if you do as much media as we do, there'll be a lot of weeks where you just pick both sides of a game and hey, you're right.
Yeah, somewhere.
Freezing cold takes.
Somewhere you're
Take
right.
that as long as you hedge. Look, I've been saying for 4 years if the Falcons are better than they've been showing.
Yeah.
This finally showed it this week.
Or as somebody pointed out, was this the dead whale game?
You don't have a dead whale game against another dead whale. That's the thing. You
dead
can't have you have a dead whale game against a live and kicking whale like the Saints.
That is true.
What the Falcons are going to do is beat the Bucs late in the season or beat the Saints late in the season or whatever it might be. Against Minnesota, man, Kirk Cousins starts off with 3 picks. Again, not every single one his fault, but the first one, throwing one right to Deion Jones. Not great. And I can't believe Cousins salvaged his stat line again. This was just classic Cousins. Plays horrendously the whole time and then just at the end of the day, get that passer rating back up. But look, Atlanta's offense, Julio Jones becomes a monster once again. Matt Ryan plays a nice, efficient game. This is what they're capable of. Coming into the season, it was supposed to be the Falcons have a baseline of success when Matt Ryan and those playmakers are out there. And as bad as their defense is, it doesn't matter. They should at least have that baseline of success, and I think this is what they should have been here in Week 6.
Yeah, I think it was. This was what Atlanta is capable of, and they were decent. And that offensive line is not horrendous either. Like, I think it gets a lot of criticism because of how the offense generally has been wallowing in mud and just getting stuck and not going anywhere. But that offensive line, like part of the reason Todd Gurley has been so successful this season, despite not looking like Todd Gurley when he was, MVP caliber Todd Gurley back with the Rams, is because the offensive line is shoehorning some pretty big holes for him to run through, and he's able to generate a huge amount of yardage without looking absurdly dynamic and incredible on the player that he once was. Like, that offensive line is not garbage, and Minnesota's defense is.
It's funny looking at pass protection numbers from yesterday. It was a lot of the tight ends and backs that let the Falcons down. Whereas with the Vikings, it was center, tackle, guard. It was the line. It was the offensive line.
I mean,
for
Drew
Minnesota.
Samia has been a terrible starting guard, and at some point, and then they had to replace him. So that was only likely to go one way.
Ezra Cleveland playing snaps, the rookie out of Boise State, and struggling. Dakota Dozier Garrett Bradbury, all of those guys struggling in pass pro here against a Falcons defensive front that, for multiple years now has really, other than Grady Jarrett, really struggled to get consistent pressure.
I'm particularly disappointed. Dakota Dozier should be better just for his name. That is the most guard name in NFL history. Dakota is a good name to begin with for an offensive lineman. Dozier, that's made to be like a road grading monster guard, and he isn't.
Let's talk about Matt Ryan really quick here. When you talk about the Falcons as a job, and this is how much we
By the way, 3 Vikings offensive linemen had pass blocking grades in the 20s.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah. Not great, Bob.
Not good at all.
Not great.
I don't know. On the preview pod, were we just ready to move on from Matt Ryan, figure out what the Falcons are going to do?
I wasn't.
Well, we were discussing the possibility, weren't we? I don't remember where this stuff came up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm back on the train. He had a nice game in a dome on the road. He's great. Look, do you look at the Falcons' job and say, we've got Matt Ryan for at least a couple more years, and we flirt with the next quarterback? This is an attractive – Atlanta should be an attractive job, right? Because of what we say with this baseline on offense.
I think the point I was making is that Ryan, they can't get rid of him, right? They're stuck with him contractually for a while, right? And you've got Julio Jones, you've got Calvin Ridley, you've got an offensive line that the pieces are there for that to be okay. I think this is a team that can rebuild with Matt Ryan at quarterback and then figure out how you transition to the next guy somewhere down the line, right? You're not in a position where you blow this whole thing up and start over from scratch with a rookie because you're stuck with Matt Ryan. He's there. So I think you can rebuild this thing around him pretty well, and then you try and work out how you get a next young quarterback.
I think that's fair. Minnesota?
It's concerning if you're a head coach and your calling card is a particular side of the ball, if that entire side of the ball collapses. The defense, Mike Zimmer has a track record of having pretty good defenses year on year on year on year. Maybe rarely gets to being truly, truly elite, but he's always got a good defense, and this defense is bad. It looks at that against Seattle. There was this little clip of Harrison Smith, screaming at Cameron Dantzler after he got beat by DK Metcalf on the big 4th and 10 play. Right, covers him, then loses him at the catch point, and that's the game almost. And you see this little clip of Harrison Smith saying, expletive Cam, or Cam, cover your expletive guy, And it looked yesterday like he was just fit to murder half that defense. What am I doing back here surrounded by these idiots who just can't cover anybody?
Do the Vikings take a guy like Harrison Smith? Are they in sell mode as we head into the trade deadline?
I mean, they probably should be, right? Because the defense is bad, and they're not going to be good this year. They are. I mean, when they got the one win, and there was a sort of feeling that okay, the offense looks fixed now. Maybe they can go on a run and get back to being somewhere mediocre. I don't. Mediocre might be too far at this point. You might be genuinely shooting for this is our one shot to really be bad this year and have a shot at a new quarterback and rebuild completely.
If Dallas wins tonight on Monday Night Football and takes control of the NFC East with their 2 wins, are they looking for an Anthony Harris, Harrison Smith? Are both safeties guys that you would put up on the trading block? And even though the Vikings brought in 15 draft picks last year, you still need more as you rebuild.
If Dallas wins tonight, they get to 500. They
have 3 wins?
They get back.
They have 3 wins.
3 and 3.
A commanding lead in the NFC East with 3 wins.
With 500. That would put them 1 game back from the Rams. But
True.
I mean, yeah, look, if you're the Vikings, I don't see a scenario whereby that defense gets fixed quickly. At which point, if you've got a guy like Harrison Smith, who's still one of the best safeties in the NFL, you already have another one in Anthony Harris. You could probably flip one of those guys for some pretty impressive draft capital at a time where that could be useful. But the other thing that struck me, I like Cameron Dantzler as a corner, 3rd-round rookie. I think he can cover people really well, particularly given his physical limitations. But he has now had back-to-back games where he's had to cover DK Metcalf, then Julio Jones. That guy is 180 pounds. How do you cover a guy that outweighs you by 50? That's huge. The difference between him and like those true number one guys in the NFL is just absurd in terms of size and physicality.
Look, we talk about this if the most important thing for receivers is getting open, the most important thing for corners is preventing guys from getting open, being in tight coverage. But then you get to the catch point, and you have to at least do something. Part of the reason why we really liked Marlon Humphrey coming out, if you read his scouting report, it's sticky in man coverage. He covers well. He can stick with receivers. He'll lose the catch point a lot of times, though, when he gave up some big plays. But that's the type of stuff that, fluctuates a little bit over time. I think your point with Dantzler, though, is fair. He does cover pretty well, but the catch point stuff might be so difficult for him against physical receivers. Is it always just going to be this big weakness where he's working from behind?
And it also becomes harder to cover well throughout the route if you're just physically overwhelmed. Like if you're trying to hand fight with a guy and his hand is like swatting you with a baseball bat and your hand is like a bamboo reed in comparison. I
don't think the average fan at home realizes how physical wide receivers and cornerbacks are with each other. When you see hand fighting, it looks like a little slap fight, but those guys are strong.
Yes.
And when you see receivers get knocked off their route by a physical corner who's got, strong hands and knows how to hand fight, and alternatively, receivers who know how to use their hands can push cornerbacks off their routes. Like you have to be strong through the route, not just at the catch point.
Think of it just in terms of like press coverage, right? If a guy comes up and tries to jam you at the line, like if your contact on him just shoves him right out of your way, you win. Like the difference between a Cameron Dantzler trying to jam you and a Stephon Gilmore trying to jam you is immense. And it's just, this is the worst 2-week stretch for him possible, right? It could only get worse if like next week he had to deal with Chase Claypool, but he's had back-to-back weeks where he's been trying to cover a guy who can run at least as fast as him and actually significantly faster if you just go by, official 40 times. And the dude outweighs him by like 50 pounds. And that's just like you're in a no-win situation at that point.
So let's move on. Minnesota, let's sell. Start selling, Vikings.
Yeah.
And they're going to make some Cousins decisions. There's a lot going on with the Vikings. Let's go to the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. We had it as one of the games of the week. You guys loved our preview over on YouTube. Everybody was reading it. A lot of Browns fans thought we were disrespecting them. But
we can claim victory though, right? This was the game.
I don't want to claim anything.
I want to claim victory.
I want to rant about Baker because that was horrendous.
Because he sucks.
He was bad.
Yeah.
And Mike Renner's going to write an article about.
Already has.
Is it already up?
I shed a single tear when I saw it come in.
I know it's going to be up at PFF.com. Like, time to be really concerned about Baker Mayfield. Here's what I saw. For the very first snap, because I've seen the film, the very first snap was concerning. And all it was a 5-yard scramble from Baker. 5-yard scramble, but the Steelers are in too high. They have one of the most classic concepts in football. You got a stick concept to the trip side. You got slant flat to the other side. And all you do is when you see too high, you work the stick side. You got a little hook and 2 out routes, and that's the side that you work when you see too high. It's just classic football. And the Steelers weren't even disguising. It wasn't even like a late rotation or anything like that. And Baker takes the snap and he works the wrong side of the field. And, of course, nobody's open on the slant flat side. And, so he starts there and then he goes back to the other side and nobody's open there because it's too late. And then he ends up scrambling for 5. And immediately I'm thinking just the easy stuff, the stuff that we call, quote, unquote, easy. Not for me, not for you, but for an NFL quarterback, working the right side of the field and taking an 8-yard gain when it's there needs to be taken. And it wasn't. And then the next play, pick 6.
Yeah.
His next pass is a pick 6. And the same thing, it wasn't like Minka comes down, he's in a lurk roll. He was there. He wasn't disguising a whole lot, and Baker doesn't see him, and he had other options to work to.
Well, it's the classic example of, look, they're going to have that first slant covered, so the window is the second slant coming in behind it because all the coverage has gone to the first one. Now, it is a pass that gets picked off a lot. Like, it's one of those ones where the quarterback wants to hit the first read.
Yeah.
So he tends to throw it way more than he should, and that's what happens. But again, like the better quarterbacks realize that's happening and take the second slant in behind it, and that would have been to Odell Beckham, and it probably would have been a pretty big gain. So like, yeah, the thing that, so to start off, right, this game I suspect was a no-win Baker game, right? This was inevitable that he was going to get his ass kicked. The Steelers, with the most blitz-happy defense in the NFL, with the most pressure-happy defense in the NFL, going up against a Browns offensive line that's got guys missing, a Baker with busted ribs, and it was set up to be a repeat of that Baltimore game in Week 1, and it kind of went exactly like that. Also, it looked like the Steelers D generally had a beat on like the snap count. Like TJ Watt was jumping the snap.
Oh yeah,
a lot,
really bad.
Baker's second pick, like TJ Watt looked offside. He jumped the
it was really
snap
close.
So well.
Yeah, I was going back and forth to see if he actually was offsides, but he timed it up.
Yeah,
well.
so they had a timing on that as well, which didn't help and made things even worse. But the concerning thing, so the fact that Baker was bad in this game, eventually pulled from it, I suspect for his own safety rather than anything else, shouldn't be surprising. But what is concerning is the stuff we've just been talking about. It's the basic misreads that is bad. Like the thing that was worrying me last year and the start of this season is that idea of just not being comfortable in the pocket and causing a lot of your own problems. But now, whatever about that stuff, if you can't just look at a defense and read the right stuff, I mean, that's even worse maybe. So now you've got two potentially crippling things from a long-term quarterback's perspective that are massive red flags. Like if those were things that were negatives on a draftable prospect, you would be massively concerned. But this is now a quarterback, a couple of years into the NFL, trying to determine whether he has long-term prospects. Those are huge problems to have this late into your career.
Yeah, I mean, there were other plays too. I mean, just third and short and Austin Hooper's wide open over the ball. You're just not taking it. I mean, there were just too many of those plays. So let's go back and recap our season so far. For Week 1, the Ravens destroy the Browns, and Baker in the passing game is terrible. In between that, up until Week 6, not great defenses. Baker's kind of protected. The offense is humming. They're moving the ball. The run game is excellent. The run blocking is excellent. They're scheming open some throws. And then you get to this game against Pittsburgh, and it's like Week 1 all over again, but even worse. It's just horrendous. I think after Week 1, we're like, maybe we overreacted a little bit, and we were ready to write off Baker. But now there's two games, the two most crucial games, the two most difficult games against the Ravens and the Steelers. I mean, yesterday was the first time I thought, are the Browns going to move on? Maybe not this year, although I wonder if Case Keenum, his backup, could actually run this offense more efficiently right now. I wonder if that's the case. And I wonder if we see Baker Mayfield and he's just thrown into the mix next year as another rejuvenation project. He might be in New England next year. They loved him coming out of the draft. There's a team like New England who liked him coming out and doesn't have a quarterback of the future right now. Do they try to make a play for him, even though we have an extra 2+ years of evidence of his NFL play? I'm just wondering if his future is in Cleveland at the moment. And am I overreacting to this?
No.
They're 4-2. Am I overreacting to the fact I think he might not be in Cleveland next year?
Maybe that part, yes. So I think after 6 weeks, my takeaways from the Browns are that the Browns are actually going to be fine long term. I think Stefanski's offense functions. It looks good. It's exactly what it was supposed to be. It's as billed, right? At which point, if they're prepared to give patience, and that's never a guarantee, the Browns should actually be pretty good going forward. I think they've got the right coach for once. But despite all those good things, Baker has not been playing well this season. He's been playing significantly worse this year than last year when everybody was willing to write him off. And that's despite everything else being great around him for 4 out of those 6 games. But I don't think there's a benefit of going to Case Keenum, right? Even though I might not disagree with you that I think in this offense he does it better. So 2017 was Keenum in the Minnesota offense, Pat Shurmur, not, a similar that protected its quarterback, or similar system in terms of it protected its quarterback a lot. And Keenum showed that, if you give him that kind of scenario, he can play well. He had a top 10 PFF grade that year. Now, It's the only time he's been anywhere in that ballpark. But I don't think it's crazy to say that if, like in the last few weeks, take out the Baltimore and the Pittsburgh game, if you put Keenum in the offense for those 4 weeks, he ends up with like a top 10 PFF grade, right? Baker didn't. Like, I don't know what his grade was compared to the rest of the NFL in that time, but it's not top 10. Let me see. I'll pull that up right now. Baker Mayfield's grade.
I'm just wondering. I mean, look, Keenum
23rd over that 4-week span, right? So the time where the Browns are putting up 40-plus points and humming, 21st if you filter out the low sample size guys. So even when everything was going perfectly, Baker Mayfield was grading outside of the top 20 quarterbacks in the NFL. And you then have to add in 2 disaster games where he was benched in one of them and could have been benched in the other one for just being that bad. So I think it's probably overreacting to say that at the end of this year they cut bait and find something else. If for no other reason than by the end of this year, they might be in really good shape, and to throw a young rookie unproven quarterback or whatever into that would be quite the gamble. But I don't think it's overreacting to, at this point, be looking at what you're getting from Baker Mayfield and be seriously concerned about his long-term prospects, because the 2 things that are his biggest negatives right now are like quarterback-killing traits. It's you cannot hang in a pocket, be comfortable, and deliver the ball where it needs to go. And 2, you can't read a defense for half the time. Like, you're missing basic day one install things that if a rookie was doing it. Joe Burrow is reading defenses significantly better than Baker Mayfield right now. And he's 6 weeks into his career behind the worst offensive line in the NFL, getting buried every week. That, I think, is a massive concern. And by the way, like, there's a bunch of people in our comments are like, oh, that guy hates Baker Mayfield. Like, dude, I am as invested in Baker Mayfield's success as any prospect that's come along during PFF's era. And it's killing me that the dude is going backwards, not forwards at this point.
Yeah, because the data loved him. We loved him.
Right.
He didn't. And he showed snippets of these negatives, but not, stretched out like this.
And rookie Baker looked great. If he just sucked at the NFL level, I'd have a way easier time of taking it. Right?
No, he had success as a rookie. He was legit as a rookie.
He was great in college. He just turns out he just doesn't have it in the pros, right? But no, like year one, rookie Baker Mayfield looked fantastic, and since then it's just gone in the tank.
On the Steelers side of it, the defense, this is what they were hoping for coming into the season.
They're good.
Yeah. But they hadn't been good on the back end, throughout much of the season. But this was Minka finally making that play. That was what kind of showed that was what made Steelers fans so excited when he showed up last year, was those big plays. They do lose Devin Bush for the season.
Yeah.
That's a tough loss in the middle of the field. But the back 7 played probably their best game of the year for the Steelers. I just want to laugh at Big Ben for a minute. Our guy Bruce Gradkowski, fellow PFFer, he's from the Pittsburgh area, always watches the Steelers closely, and he's buddies with Big Ben.
Yeah,
they're buddies. And he was tweeting yesterday about how much Big Ben hates RPOs and then run pass options, right? And they ran 3 at the beginning of the game, and they were just horrendous. Big Ben, who he works the screen game pretty well. He's got a quick release. He could do a lot of that stuff. He looks so uncomfortable running an RPO. You stick the ball in. You got to read a linebacker. If he moves up, you're throwing it behind him. Big Ben almost threw a pick right into 2 dudes to start it off. And then he's got multiple batted passes, and just the whole thing just looked off. And the RPO in general should be easy money. Mm-hmm. It should be like, just make the defense wrong, steal 8 yards here and there. I don't know if we would see another one from the Steelers the rest of the season. Big Ben hates play action too.
Yeah,
right.
Well, he's one of those
hates
guys
turning his back to the defense, even though it helps him. But he's had success without it throughout his career.
Is there something to, like, I don't know, do coaches need to take back some of the power from these like star quarterbacks who, like, I don't like doing this, I don't like doing that, like.
With play action, yes. With an RPO, if you're just going to lose 2 or 3 RPOs, thing. Maybe.
But like Ben not wanting to run play action because he doesn't like taking his eyes off the defense. Rodgers not wanting to run motion and stack formations and stuff because he doesn't like messing with the pre-snap picture. Like, all these things that quarterbacks have sort of decided that, hey, I don't really like that because it. Like, do you just have to be like, dude, this is better offense, so suck it up and deal with it?
It's a tough balance because
if you're going to be a Hall of Famer, you might need to be able to deal with taking your eyes off the defense for a split second.
As a former professional athlete, Sam, let me just try to convey with you how important confidence is.
Okay.
And having conviction, right? So the same thing with, like a catcher puts down signs for me to throw.
Yeah.
Right? And if I trust, so I would throw to a catcher who I trust, and I feel like he put the work in, and I feel like when he calls my terrible slider,
right,
he knows something. Even though I don't want to throw it, he wants me to, and I have conviction, and I throw it, and we're in tandem. If you don't trust the catcher, and if you don't trust the play caller in this instance, you're not going to have that same conviction. So I think there's something to that. And I think up until this game, say Aaron Rodgers, I think he had that. He was trusting Matt LaFleur up until this past game when they were terrible. But those first 4 games, they were in sync, and there was trust. 4 games, and it's different. And then you feel better about doing something out of your comfort zone. So I think that you just find that balance, and you have to try to earn that trust as the coach with the quarterback and make sure that they're confident to answer your question. But this was Steelers, the Titans, the AFC is loaded and rolling.
So you posed me a question last night, I think, that I answered kind of flippantly and off the cuff, but I actually think it's the right answer. You're like, why do people not block Bud Dupree? Right? Because he's not that good a pass rusher. In fact, he's by far the worst pass rusher that they have as a actual pass rusher.
He had a cleanup sack,
right,
and the unblocked sack.
But he gets a ton of sacks, a ton of pressure for a guy that's not that good.
Really quick, I want to credit him. He gets a lot of what we consider cleanup sacks, late in the down sacks, pursuit sacks. He's got a good motor. Like he plays hard, and over time you'll stumble into plays. I think our criticism of Bud Dupree has been defeating one-on-one blocks. He does it at a much lower level than everyone else.
And Robert Mays, I think, wrote an article on this and highlighted it, friend of the show, during last week. And it's like the Steelers blitz with a purpose. They're not just reckless, right? They blitz specifically to ensure that you can't double team the guys on that line. So Cameron Hayward has been one of the best interior defensive linemen over the past season plus because they've been dialing up this blitz, and you can't double team Cameron Hayward anymore because there's more guys, where there's as many guys coming as you can block. So Cameron Hayward is one-on-one all day long, as is Stephon Tuitt, as is TJ Watt. So now when you have 3 legitimate players to worry about, if you're ever in doubt about which way to slide the line, it's going to be away from Bud Dupree. So he suddenly has all these free rushers and plays against crappy running backs and tight ends and stuff, and he's got a ton of cleanup plays.
Are we going to say the same thing about him when he hits free agency again this year, like we did Matthew Judon? Nice in that system, but don't overpay for him as your
I mean, he would be
rusher.
as a guy that hits free agency with some pretty impressive numbers. I would suspect I would not want to be paying him big money.
All right, we're going to skip some order here. We're going to go Denver Broncos at the New England Patriots. This was it's just a different feeling in New England this year, right? I mean, you've got a team. I think first off, I think the Broncos did a fantastic job of they ran the ball efficiently. Drew Lock had one of the weirdest games you'll see. He made so many really good throws with nothing to show for him.
Yeah.
Really good throws, tight windows, giving his guys opportunity. My man Tim Patrick is still awesome.
Great snag down the side.
Yeah, he had a couple. He is really legit. But Denver overall did a really nice job of just, grinding the ball. But New England's offense, other than the Week 2 game against Seattle, where they have one half of looking like a really good explosive offense. They have other parts where they've run the ball well and they've pounded the opposing defense and all that stuff. But man, they feel limited compared to what they've been in the past, especially the past game.
Yeah, but it was on prime time, so it's seared into people's brains as what they are, which is part of the problem.
And all it was Julian Edelman was trying to be covered by Jamal Adams, and it was a mismatch, and Cam played really well in that game.
That was the thing. Yeah, Cam was really good in that game, and they found a massive mismatch, which doesn't exist most other weeks. This was, I think, the biggest surprise of the weekend. Whatever about Patriots, I don't think the Patriots are that good this year. So I'm not massively surprised that they struggled against a good Denver defense, but I didn't see that Denver being as effective with Drew Lock coming in and being the quarterback. If you looked at his numbers before this game, they weren't good. I think, what do the numbers say now? How many big-time throws this week? Is it still 6?
I think 5.
Okay,
I think we have almost 5. Few turnover worth. I mean, he did try to give the game away toward the end.
That didn't help. But he almost doubled his career big-time throw total in this game on its own, right?
Yeah.
He had 6 big-time throws coming into this game and 5 in this game. And, Brett Rippon in his one cameo essentially against the Jets had 4 big-time throws. So, like, Rippon had a way better big-time throw rate and a better big-time throw to turnover-worthy play ratio than Drew Lock did. Like, everyone was sort of assuming that, hey, Drew Lock comes back in the lineup, we actually have a viable quarterback, and suddenly we're in business again. But the numbers actually said that, you know what, he might not be a dramatically better player than Brett Rippon, albeit one that's probably less likely to throw the ball directly to the opposition. But this was the game where he actually started dealing, and it's weird because anyone that didn't watch the game is not going to appreciate it because you're going to look at his numbers and say, well, Denver couldn't score any points. They had to field goal New England to death, and his passer rating was like 30. So how good could he have played? Like, well, seriously, go watch it. He played a hell of a lot better than any of those numbers are going to suggest. Yeah,
the passing stats were horrible, but he did make some really nice throws. This was also a game where there was a decision to be made. The Patriots, they were down 15. They scored a touchdown, so you need an 8 and a 7. They went for the 2 early. They didn't get it. Trent Green was very confused and mad about it. But again, I think it's the right way to go. And it almost ended up benefiting them because Denver started throwing them the ball, and they knew that they still needed 2 scores, and they changed the game. They kicked a field goal. They got within 1 score. And then they still had a chance for a game-ending or game-winning touchdown at the end.
It is interesting how much those sort of former players struggle with this idea, right?
I just don't. You just have to put work into it. That's all it is.
But like Rich Gannon almost lost his goddamn mind. He had like a little card that he was waving at the camera about when you go for 2 and stuff. Like he was off on one.
So maybe he did research. He's got different numbers.
I think he just
if you have a card.
But he just had like the old card that says you go for 2 in these specific scenarios where like, and Trent Green, as you say, was disgusted at the decision, like ranting against it. Those kinds of things, like if the league is clearly changing and pivoting in a direction, would you not maybe, find out? Like, would you not at least question what you're saying, right? Instead of if this comes up, I'm just going to rail against it like we're in the 1990s. Like maybe go, all right, well, let's figure out what they're thinking here and just check I'm not an idiot before I go off on this rant.
Like I said earlier, the tough part is the good decision is 2% better than the bad decision, right? But it's a binary, this is good, this is bad. So that's where I think you lose a little bit of the messaging.
It's so bizarre how upset they get over this. It's like, this is a terrible decision. And again, it's like we just talked about, like it's pretty close either way, right? So even us saying, well, it's a no-brainer, obviously do this, is a little bit of a silly way of presenting it. But to be so adamant that that's like the worst decision you can make is going for 2 in this scenario it's bizarre to me. I don't understand why they don't take a beat and check.
I just think it's just when you learn, because I didn't know, all of us didn't know this at one point too. All of us had traditional thinking at one point and then evolved as we got more information. It's maybe they don't have the information yet
in a lot of scenarios. So I get why you initially think that way, and I get why it's processed. But that's why I'm saying, like, at this point, when you see so many of them, if you're Trent Green or Rich Gannon, I know you were in the league for a lot of time. You played really well. You were a great quarterback. But, like, when you see this going against what you think, would you not, like, think, all right, why is this happening? Let me just check that there's not something I'm missing before I go off on, like, a 2-minute rant that goes off on, Twitter.
Did you hear Chris and Al's discussion last night? They were arguing about it in the hallway, and they talked about it on air and Al was on the side of, why would you go for 2? And Chris was backing us up in this general, go for 2, so so people are still, Al was very upset on the broadcast. I just want to give credit to the Broncos defense. Pass rushing wise, Shelby Harris, ton of plays. One led to an interception. Bradley Chubb making some plays. I think, though, on the back end, Michael Ojemudia and Bryce Callahan both played really well for Denver. I think so Broncos defense played excellent. The Patriots offense, was this just what we thought coming into the season? Our initial thoughts, our prior preseason explanation was Tom Brady struggled last year statistically because guys didn't get open. Cam Newton's probably not as good as Tom Brady, even at this point in their careers. He's going to struggle passing the ball with the same guys who probably aren't getting open. And that was a factor yesterday. All of that, too, the Patriots haven't really practiced in 2 weeks, too. Right. Like, we have to throw that out there. But it was a rough offensive performance.
I think we're definitely seeing the limitations of having no receivers, which was their problem last year. It's their problem this year. Damiere Byrd might be their best receiver, and Damiere Byrd is not good.
Right.
He's dangerous because he's faster than anybody else they have, but this is not a good group of receivers, and it was a problem for Brady all last season. It's a problem for Cam Newton. Like, your margin for error is so small when this is your receiving group, and if you go up against good corners like they were going up against, at least yesterday. I mean, Ojemudia hasn't played well this season, but he played well yesterday, and Callahan is good. They don't have the margin for error for Cam to be off. Like, late in the game, he had the fourth down play, and he just missed it, right? Like, if your receivers are bad, every one of those throws needs to be perfect. It's the thing we talked about for Cam for years, that if you get guys that can't get open, you're forcing him that every pass he makes needs to be pinpoint accurate. And he isn't a pinpoint accurate quarterback most of the time. So your offense isn't going to be good.
They got Patriots have the 49ers next week. I'm losing my take that they're just going to beat the bad teams and lose to the good ones. They lost to a team that, on paper, Denver, they shouldn't have lost to. And, credit the Broncos. They played a great game in New England. Again, it's a different feeling. The Patriots that doesn't happen to them in New England historically. Right. They're under 500 for the first time this late in the season since 2002. Packers at the Bucs. Let's get into this game. The 4:00 game, supposed to be the game of the week. Packers get up 10-0, looking dominant early on, dominating time of possession, and then Aaron Rodgers throws a pick 6.
Two tremendously difficult to explain things this week. One, the performance of Aaron Rodgers, and two, how you end up with a late slate of games, one of which was the Jets against the Dolphins. 2 games.
I think the NFL just they want that 4:00 game, certain 4:00 games to feel like a primetime game. They want the whole world. They want to get a good rating, essentially.
Okay.
That's what it is, right?
I guess.
Because it obviously doesn't make sense to make a hardcore football fan watch 9 games in one window, and then 1 game in the second window, and maybe glance at Jets Dolphins.
God. So this game on paper, I thought was a good game for Green Bay. And the one thing I was most sure about is that, hey, Green Bay's offensive line has been amazing. You
mean going in? Thought?
Yeah. Their pass protection has been incredible. Rodgers has been getting the ball out of his hands faster, and that's made that group look even better. And Tampa Bay lost Vita Vea. Like, they're not going to be able to get a ton of pressure. It turns out Rodgers just got buried all game long. He started off okay, and then it's like the pick 6 broke something in his brain. And from that moment on, he seemed intent on throwing more interceptions. Now, the second one, I don't think you actually blame Rodgers for. But in our world, that falls incomplete. That was a great play. It was a well-thrown slant.
Yes.
That the defensive back made a great play on, which resulted in a deflection that landed in the hands of a safety. Like that, in the world of our turnover-worthy play world, that isn't a turnover-worthy play. It wasn't worthy of ending up as a turnover.
Right.
It just ended up as a turnover because of a great play by the defense.
That one falls incomplete, but 97% of the time.
But he had multiple other plays that were turnover-worthy. Like, he threw the ball to Antoine Winfield Jr., who dropped it. That should have been a turnover and wasn't. So Rodgers was intent in this game on tossing turnover-worthy plays left and right in a way you just don't ever see him. Like, he hadn't had one at all before this game.
There was that, plus you have Mercedes Lewis wide open up the seam.
Missed him.
And he missed him. Anytime you have your offensive tackle wide open up the seam, you got to hit him. And so that was what was interesting about this, too. It wasn't just the turnover-worthy play flood from Rodgers. It was his accuracy was off as well. Every compliment that we gave him through 4 weeks, accuracy's back, decision-making's pristine, all that stuff kind of went out the window in this game here. So something was off after that pick 6. And I don't know if there's there's just a big body of work of Aaron Rodgers playing really well throughout most of his career. But I don't know if there's a little front runner to him right now. He's feeling good. They're up 10-0. He throws the pick 6. And then the second pick, even though it's not his fault, it snowballed. We don't believe in momentum or anything here, but clearly something changed in how Aaron Rodgers played the game after the 2 picks.
He just got rattled. He was also jawing with Ndamukong Suh all through the game in a way that they were saying the last thing you want to do is make Aaron Rodgers mad, but this almost seemed like it was like it seemed like Sue was winning the mental battle, right?
Yeah.
Like he's messing with him, he's giving him late shots, he's roughing him up a little bit after the ball's gone, and the two of them are going back and forth, and it's like you can see that this is Rodgers just getting more and more pissed off, and it's not resulting in the determined pissed off Rodgers that's going to beat you because of it. It's resulting in this Rodgers who's like he's just missing everything, trying so hard to like rub it in Sue's face, and then even plays where Rodgers was making a play, like he hit Devontae Adams up the sideline, and Adams just doesn't get his feet in. Like he's backing up really towards the sideline. Yeah. Throw is exactly where it needs to be, and Adams just can't get the footwork right. Ends up being an incomplete pass. Like again, like everything just sort of was a little bit off for this Green Bay offense. Plus, you lose David Bakhtiari. Clearly, that's going to have an effect on your pass protection. Just didn't go well for Green Bay.
I also, from a Bucs standpoint, I mean, those linebackers, Levante David's already one of the league's best in general, but they fly around the field. And then defense in today's NFL, if you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, I use the word capable a lot because that's essentially all you can ask for on defense is a capable defense. And that is the Bucs in a nutshell. In a given week, with what Carlton Davis brings on the outside and Jamel Dean on the outside, plus the linebackers flying around, they are capable of putting together high-end performances. Their aggressiveness, their ability to just make quarterbacks make decisions a little bit quicker than they'd like to because they're flying around and blitzing a ton. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean especially had just a monster game yesterday. So that was a good performance by the Bucs on the back seven. And then offensively, Brady to Gronk had a little rejuvenation.
It did.
I thought they didn't play. They didn't have the ball a lot on offense, the Bucs, because of all the way the game flow went. But Aikman was talking about a little bit how this was a little – you've been saying all year is how much of the old Brady comfortable offense is going to be combined with Bruce Arians. This was a Brady ball control offense early, and then 3 big-time throws to Gronk that, created chunk plays and created that flipped the field a little bit. That was a little bit more Patriots offense as far as the style went. And I think that bodes well, too. Once Chris Godwin's back, this offense is going to be tough to defend, especially if Gronk has those extra turbos that he can bust out every now and again.
It's nice to see a blocking tight end get in the end zone every once in a while.
That was a really nice catch. But
was.
Brady had 3 big-time throws, all tight window throws to Gronk.
Yeah.
And if he's making those plays, plus with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Scotty Miller's deep threat, and Tyler Johnson had a touchdown and emerging the rookie that we like, that is what people anticipated coming into the year for this Bucs offense, and they're finally all on the field together.
Todd Bowles and the Bucs defense also did a really good job of scheming up the blitz, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that they just won up front, but they dialed up blitzes really well and timed them really well. Like in particular, third down, they caused them all kinds of problems with what they were doing. Like they don't typically generate a ton of pressure on third down, but they cause Rodgers all kinds of issues. And Rodgers' grade against the blitz this week was 39. Like yes. Rodgers usually is one of those quarterbacks that will carve up the blitz if you send it at him, but the timing of when they did it and to sort of mess with their tendencies just caused him to have an absolute disaster. And on third down, when they blitzed, his grade was 27. So like it just the worst possible time. So even if the overall numbers weren't necessarily as dramatic as you might think in terms of pressure and how much he was under, it's when they were happening. Like they were dialing up blitz on third down that Rodgers wasn't expecting, and it was just almost a complete disaster every time.
It speeds up your decision making. You throw maybe when you don't want to. How much do we take out of this from Rodgers? Was it just that the first 4 games happened to be the first 4 games of the season, and it's not this narrative that everything's different, he's better, he's back? Or was he so good that he had to regress, and it just all came in one game?
Well, as our PFF Moo, Timo Riska, said, they had faced a pretty weak slate of passing defenses.
Yeah.
Like teams that can cover. They hadn't really faced any. This was a team that can cover, and it went really badly for Rodgers. So I think we can probably look at this and say, all right, the first few weeks was insane. It was probably in part a product of how weak the passing defenses they faced were. But this is probably also like the other end of the scale. Like this is the extreme in the other direction, that this is not going to repeat too much either. This was clearly a day. Rodgers had his first pick six since 2017. It could have, like, there could have been more, you know? He does not make those plays in his career. Right. He's made a career out of not doing that. So for him to have that many of those plays in one game suggests that this is some kind of isolated incident, not like a, inherent flaw in him.
All right, let's move to the other NFC North team. The Chicago Bears moving to 5-1 over the Carolina Panthers. Did we underrate the Bears' defense coming into the season?
No, I don't think so. The Bears, to quote the late Dennis Green, they are what we thought they were. I think this is a good roster.
You thought they were a 5-1 team?
I think that this is a good roster that will go as far as a massively volatile quarterback will take them. As long as Nick Foles is not the reason they're losing games, they'll win games, if that makes sense. Like the roster is good enough for this team to be decent. I don't think they're 5-1 decent. And I don't think, like, their record at the end of the season will not be whatever a 16-game projection of 5-1 is, right?
We always talked about Jameis Winston as a volatile quarterback and Foles as a volatile quarterback, and we've described Foles as volatile on a game-by-game basis, 90 here and 30 there. His volatility has all happened within the game and landed with 4 straight passing grades in the 60s.
Yeah.
So sometimes that happens too.
Right.
And if he lands in the 60s every week, I don't know, there'll be enough big plays in there that they could create some offense, and the defense, they're relying on the D. It's an ugly 5-1, but it's 5-1.
Right. And I think the team is good, right? So as long as Foles isn't an active drag on them winning games, I think they're going to be in shape to do these things. Their only problem is going to be when you get those 1 or 2 games a year where Foles grades in like the 40s, and you're not going to win those games.
He made a really nice touchdown pass to Cole Kmet, the rookie tight end out of Notre Dame. That was part of the story of the game. Teddy Bridgewater throwing an early pick. We talked about the Rodgers interception not necessarily being turnover worthy. That first Teddy Bridgewater one was the same thing. Tipped pass right at the catch point. This falls incomplete. 99% of the time. Tayshaun Gibson ends up picking it off. I mean, just that play alone completely changed the course of the game because the Bears had that short field for the touchdown. So, are you going to buy into the Bears at this point? I'm asking the same. Yeah, I'm asking the same question again, but
right. Like what?
I just don't want to give. I don't want to give them enough credit. It's the ugly 5-1.
Okay, so because Green Bay lost, they're now top of the NFC North. So is the question: will the Chicago Bears win the division?
Let me just say this. I think they are closer to the 2018 version than they're the 2019 version. 2018 is when they won the division. The defense was tough. I can't wait to watch them play Green Bay a couple times, and I think that battle is going to be fantastic. They're having a guy like Jalen Johnson playing corner the way he is as a rookie. I mean, that is, to me, those are the stories for the Bears. Is the fact that here's the difference between, say, the Bears and the Vikings. Both teams 2 or 3 years ago, especially on defense, were fantastic, depth everywhere, and now this year, the Vikings look like they're still trying to figure out what they have, and the Bears have actually found some replacements. And they have guys like Tayshaun Gibson and Jalen Johnson on the back end. Like an overhauled secondary compared to that 2018 team, that's really playing well.
I mean, so look, they are 5-1, but they're plus 12 in points differential.
That's right. That's what I mean. That matters.
The Ravens are also 5-1, but they're plus 75 in points differential, and they got their ass kicked by the Chiefs. Right. So like
that matters over time.
Yeah. Fundamentally, they are probably not as good as 5-1, but I do think that roster is good enough to have them in contention. So I guess I'm buying into them that they're a pretty good team. I think they'll make a wild card spot, but I suspect that Green Bay still wins that division.
All right, that's fair. Carolina moves to 3-3, and Jeremy Chin with a really nice interception. Still looking for Derek Brown. Got after the quarterback a little bit better than he had previously, but they're still in rebuilding mode. They were, wow, I can't believe they got to 3-2 though. They overachieved, I think, early on. The Panthers. They moved to 3-3. Let's get to Sunday Night Football. Los Angeles Rams, San Francisco 49ers. Did this game go as expected? Did we overrate the horrible Jimmy G performance the previous week against the Dolphins?
This is such a weird, both these teams, when you look at like who they've played, is such a bizarre, like the Rams' entire win schedule is based off the NFC East. They're 4-0 against the NFC East and 0-2 against everybody else. The 49ers before yesterday hadn't had a win outside of New Jersey. Their 2 wins had come against the Giants and the Jets, each of whom were winless at that point, and they were 0-3 in their own building. Like, I don't know what to make about that at all. So, I mean, yes, it was concerning heading into this game that the 49ers had 3 quarterbacks, each of whom had shown terrible play in the last 2 weeks. On the other hand, like, the entire Rams the entire Rams record is built on a house of sand in terms of the NFC East, so we don't know what to make of them either. I guess this was one of the more difficult to analyze games because the outside factors in terms of what we're weighing in these teams were so bizarre.
I think in this one you have I just love this matchup all the time. Shanahan, Sean McVay, everybody thinks of them as good play callers, good head coaches, and all that stuff. The Rams had played such a clean brand of football through 5 weeks. They had and again, NFC East, whatever, but they had taken care of Jared Goff, created open throws. He wasn't missing a ton of throws, but he wasn't making any great ones. It felt like there was way more on Goff's plate in this one, especially as the game got out of hand. Early on, they tried to protect him. And then the Niners, I mean, there were open throws left and right, and Garoppolo was doing a much better job of executing the offense now. I think it just shows, you can create off. Kyle Shanahan knows how to create offense, and I just think he did a better job of that than McVay in the Rams offense, Kevin O'Connell. In this one, Shanahan did a really nice job of bouncing back.
I mean, their entire game plan, particularly early, was based off Jimmy Garoppolo not having to play quarterback. Like, your passes are going to be touch passes at the line of scrimmage. It's going to be jet sweeps. Like, we're going to do whatever it is we can do.
A-Dot was -2 at one point.
Yeah, for a while. Yeah. Until they finally took that one shot 2 yards beyond the first down or beyond the line of scrimmage for the first down on 2nd and 3 or whatever it was. Like, his average depth of target for the game was 4.8. This was as protected as you're going to see a quarterback in the course of a game. But the difference was this week he was actually able to do that. Like, last week, his ankle was so bad that it didn't matter how much you protected him. He couldn't throw.
Right.
This week, he may have been still gimpy, but he was at least capable of executing a game plan that dramatically protects its quarterback in a way that he wasn't the week before, and Nick Mullins wasn't able to the week before that, and C.J. Beathard just might not be able to, period. This was at least viable.
Chris also made the point about Emmanuel Mosley being back, and then Jason Verrett making some plays. He had that. It was a 4th down interception in the end zone, but it was a really nice play. Jason Verrett's going to end up with an elite grade in here.
We need to figure out a way of shoehorning extra comeback player of the year awards this season, because Alex Smith needs one, right?
Yeah.
For his comeback. Even if he doesn't play another down, Alex Smith should get comeback player of the year. On the other hand, Jason Verrett has played more snaps now than he has in the last 3 years, I think, combined. He might, if he plays for another couple of games, he'll be more than the last 4 years combined. Like, his comeback is absurd as well. And you've got Aldon Smith, who was out of the game for 5 years.
I know, right?
Like, and there's still people out there that are like, oh, Big Ben deserves it because he hurt his elbow. Or Cam deserves it because he got a bit banged up. Like, get the hell out of here. Like, those 3 people are 3 of the most absurd comebacks the game has seen. We should be able to, take away some, routine ACL surgery that a guy has come back from and give them to those 3.
I generally hate the comeback player of the year award because we're having this debate. It feels like it should be the most feel-good story, which is Alex Smith, but there's also other ones in Jason Verrett or
But this is
Smith.
A year where at least 2 of them have been nuts. Okay, the Aldon Smith thing, I think you can park to one side because, his personal demons also led to some pretty ugly things in terms of legal woes and, domestic violence and whatever. So if we want to cut that out that's not a feel-good story necessarily. But the other 2 are, as I say, when you compare those to 1 year didn't Phillip Rivers win it for just coming back from being bad the year before?
2012 he was just bad, and 13 he was good. That might have been it.
Right, and then he won comeback player of the year for just not sucking that year. That's how you win it 1 year, and then this year Alex Smith, who nearly lost his leg, might not win it because you've got Jason Verrett coming back, or vice versa.
I was impressed by the 49ers defense. That was a lot closer to last year's performance than it was what they had been doing in recent weeks as well.
Yep.
Particularly on the back end. All right, for our YouTube viewers, yeah, we screwed up. We forgot the Bengals and Colts. So we put it right in. The magic of video, they're back in. Podcast listeners, ignore me.
We could have snuck the whole thing in with just, like a little, whatever they call those things, like a jump cut or a transition or whatever, and they wouldn't have known.
Transition in.
But
Bengals.
You go and blow the whole game by telling them.
We're all about transparency here. We just tell the truth. Inside radio, inside baseball.
All right.
So let's get into it. The Cincinnati Bengals and the Indianapolis Colts. My initial impression of the Bengals, so they get up to a 24-7 lead.
Yeah.
And then from that point, the Colts, they win 24-3 the rest of the way, so they end up winning the game. I thought the Bengals offense looked like, people were hoping coming out. That's the story of this week. They are what we were hoping they were. And T. Higgins is making big plays. Tyler Boyd's working in the middle of the field. A.J. Green might be finishing that late career morph into Larry Fitzgerald possession receiver.
Are you basing that off that like one catch?
Maybe a couple. Just like everything's a little bit more contested, and he's moving the chains.
Yeah, but like you were saying that he's becoming Larry Fitzgerald. In order to do that, you have to be like good at the contested catch stuff consistently and able to make a lot of those catches. Like Green's got like a couple of catches in the last 3 weeks.
He's going to be there. Yeah, but Fitz, whatever. I'm just saying, a few different playmakers making plays for the Bengals. Joe Burrow spreading the ball around. But then the Colts came to life, locked down the passing lanes a little bit more. Pass rush got home a little bit more. It was actually not the worst performance by the Bengals O-line that we trash every week. But credit Phillip Rivers and the Colts for battling back, and Rivers made a bunch of pretty nice throws down the field.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing – so this was a good bounce-back game from Rivers, right? It's not like it was perfect. There's always a bad throw in there for Rivers.
The dome. He went from outdoors back into the dome.
Certainly has to help.
Opened the roof though. Does that? Is it? So it was an outdoor game.
They opened the roof.
They had the roof open.
Did they have? I thought they just had windows at the back end. I think
it was open. When I see the sun, I'm assuming that it's open.
Yeah, I just know when I picture that stadium in my head, I forget there's a roof to it. I thought they just had like windows at the back end.
I could be wrong too, but I'm pretty sure it opens.
Yeah, I think you're right. But anyway, this was a good bounce back game from Rivers, and this is the kind of game that this is what they're supposed to have, right? This is the Phillip Rivers that is good enough for them to win, be productive, have some really nice plays in the passing game, but you're never quite sure. You're always kind of waiting for like the bad, and there's probably going to be a bad throw in there as well. But at least it's not what it was last week, which is so many bad plays it just prohibits you from winning. The other side of things, Joe Burrow is so a kind of a bounce back game from him in that it wasn't a disaster like a week ago, but I think it's not time to get worried. But Burrow is starting to show some signs of the weight of pressure that's coming down on him in terms of you can see him now start to take his eyes off downfield and start to look at the rush and start to get a little bit twitchy in the pocket even when guys aren't necessarily getting beat. And I just think that I don't know that you can play behind pass protection that's as bad as this for a extended period of time without it having some kind of attritional effect on your play. And I think we've just started to see creeping signs that is now weighing on Joe Burrow. I like, unless you're Peyton Manning in terms of being so entrenched in the like unimpeachable technical aspects of your game, there's no amount of playing behind Tony Hugo will change it. I think every quarterback in the NFL eventually starts to get worn down by that level of pass protection, and we're starting to see it now for Burrow.
And this was one of the better games that they played up front.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's the residual effect of every single – we described Baker as seeing the rush way too much and all that stuff, and I don't even know if that's from bad offensive. That's just Baker losing his pocket presence a little bit. I think I'm more concerned when I described Burrow coming out is the velocity on the ball. He had a lot of throws at LSU that were they were great accuracy, and they get there at the college level. And, fans say this all the time. Well, that'll never work at the NFL level. And there's an element to truth there. Like, you got to be a little bit quicker, right? Everything's a little bit faster at the NFL level. And that was the game-ending interception from Burrow. Julian Blackmon makes a really nice play on the ball. He's making a ton of plays right now. The rookie safety for the Colts, 2 picks, 4 pass breakups in his career through 6 weeks here. those would be my concerns. He had a misread, threw the ball right to the linebacker underneath Burrow, and then he had the Blackman interception. I don't know. Like, he's got to be precise in the middle of the field, and we're not always seeing that.
That's kind of what I felt about Darnold's arm, actually, is that there were so many of those plays in college where they just sort of landed in a bucket as opposed to actually showed great arm strength. Look, I don't want to get too down on Burrow. I think he's played well outside of that Baltimore game, which is basically a no-win proposition when you're dealing with what he's dealing with. I don't want to make out like he's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Of all the problems in Cincinnati, I think Burrow is, even within the offense, way down the list, right? I think play calling, I think offensive line are the two biggest. But the big question for this year was, look, he looks really good right from day one, but can he survive playing an entire season behind this offensive line without it having a lasting detrimental effect? This is the first time that I think that's now a serious question, because it's the first time that I think you can see evidence of that line play, or the line play, having an effect on his game. It's changing his game in a way that can't possibly be good long term.
Definitely something to keep an eye on going forward. I mean, that's for the Bengals, for Bengals fans this season, is, watching Burrow's development, watching to make sure that he doesn't get broken. Huge game for the Colts. I mean, I don't know where the Colts are going to end up going, but they're coming off a disappointing game against the Browns. They're back to 4-2, and you have an undefeated Titans team sitting ahead of them. And how hard could it be? AFC South. Maybe it's getting more hard. It's getting harder. It's getting harder in the AFC South. It's more difficult. But it's just a huge game. And I don't know if you're going to look back to this game. It's a Bengals game at home, sure, but you might look back at this game and say, okay, this coming back from this 24-7 deficit is what turned the Colts season around. I like to look at those little pivot points, but it's huge. If they lost to the Bengals and they fall to 3-3 with the Titans sitting there at 4-0, their division's not completely lost, but it's close, and wild card spots are hard to come by in the AFC now.
Yeah,
so huge
really
game
are.
for the Colts.
It is. The Colts feel like one of those teams that are going to be bouncing around all season based off the Phillip Rivers game you get. Like, if you get the game where he's shot putting late to the flat for pick sixes,
right,
you're going to think the Colts suck. If you get a game where the Phillip Rivers that they're supposed to get, a few big time throws, maybe one bad play in the game, otherwise pretty efficient, like, the Colts are a good team. They're a little bit like the Bears in that regard, and that the rest of this roster is good enough for this team to be a wild card team, to maybe threaten for the division lead. But where they end up on that spectrum is entirely dependent on the quarterback.
Xavier Rhodes, ex-Xavier Rhodes, continues to play pretty well this season. I really think the Colts, they lost a little bit of that luster where they had that incredible defense through 4 weeks of the season. Right. They got crushed by the Browns. Even in this game, you're giving up like 0.6 EPA in the pass game in the first half against the Bengals here. That's really bad. That's really high. So they're not on the way to becoming the 85 Bears like it may have looked for 4 weeks. But Indy's one of those capable defenses. Generally don't give up the big plays. Got torched by T. Higgins behind the D. But, they'll be that middle-of-the-pack type of team that's going to compete in the playoffs.
They're also they miss Darius Leonard when he's not on the field a lot.
They do.
I don't want to say friend of the show. What's the opposite of friend of the show? Enemy of the show?
Colleague?
Guy that hates
of
us?
the show?
So
guy that we've had on the show who was not happy with us?
Former guest of the show who dislikes when we grade him low.
I think he's injured. He's sitting on his grade right now. I think he knows that if he just sits out a few weeks, he'll be in that top 101.
Okay. Well, anyway, they miss when he's not on the field. They miss him a lot, and I think that in addition, they were definitely a little bit of fool's gold in terms of not as good as they looked early in the season based off their opposition. But they've also been missing Darius Leonard, which makes a major difference to that defense.
So I'm going to sum it up by saying pivotal, season-changing game for the Colts.
Okay.
There's 2 more games to get through.
What do we got?
I don't mean to say it like that, to get through. We're not just trying to play out the slate.
Oh, no, we are.
But when you have Jets, Dolphins, and Lions, Jaguars, you are a little bit. So there's tank for Trevor Lawrence. Let me just say, I told Jets fans, your game is Saturday at noon.
Yeah.
And boy, Trevor Lawrence was dealing. He had a turnover worthy play in there. He had a bad one. He had a bad decision. But man, he throws NFL caliber lasers with ease. Lawrence is actually getting better.
Yeah. Should we just make the Jets review every week, just the Trevor Lawrence game?
Update? Lawrence had 5 touchdowns by the half against Georgia Tech. Really impressive performance.
It's funny. So the very first play, I think it might have been his very first throw in college, was like a jump ball to T. Higgins or somebody, and he scored a touchdown, but it was all the receiver, right? And then I caught like this run of just average Trevor Lawrence, even though he was grading really well, and everyone was like, "This is the best quarterback since Andrew Luck, if not before." And it was one of those ones where you catch a crappy end of a guy's play and it warps your perception. So it took longer for me to come around to the Trevor Lawrence thing because I just hadn't seen the high end yet. But the more I watch, like the more it's insane. His high end is nuts.
Yeah, he
is really, really good. He's got to be the number 1 overall pick. And if you're the Jets, like as crappy as this season is, you're probably going to be cleaning house. Like it's a great situation for you to snag. I mean, it's the Joe Burrow thing, right? You get to grab yourself a Joe Burrow or a Trevor Lawrence, who could be even better, and it changes everything immediately.
I'm just so proud of you for changing.
Thanks.
Because you never come off your initial college football takes.
I knew at the time that it was probably not a fair reflection of how he was playing.
I feel like I'm seeing you evolve.
This game was depressing as hell, by the way.
Jaguars too. We're gonna lump both games into this discussion here. A little bit of the shine's coming off of Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for them and the Jets. Looking to the future. The Lions, you mentioned off air, the Lions' schedule in the next few weeks might have them creeping back to what we thought they would be coming into the season, which is at least a contender, at least a team that's going to compete.
Or at least over 500.
Right, and they'll have a chance to compete in the NFC North. I think that's a huge story as Matt Patricia's fighting for his job, and maybe the schedule is going to work out well for them. DeAndre Swift went off, the rookie running back for the Lions. You also, back to the Jets and Dolphins game too, you said like the Dolphins, Fitz turned the ball over in the red zone again, and there was a butt pick too.
Yeah.
Remember the first butt pick was Marshawn Lattimore a couple years ago. This is another butt pick.
This one was more creative though. There was more to it than just the ball lands on his ass cheek and he intercepts it. Like this required some concentration.
That's the highlight of the Jets season.
Yeah.
Butt pick.
Tua got on the field.
Tua got on the field.
Did you see enough of him from the last 227 of handing off the ball to be convinced that they made the right call?
He had a 71 grade, so he's
perfect
on 2 throws, on 2 passes, right? So he's legit.
Yeah. That's all I needed to see.
I still worry about his eye. You talk about him and Burrow are interesting because they don't have cannons. I know Tua's shown it a little bit, and Trent Dilfer thinks he has a cannon, but I love Trent, but I just haven't seen it. I still wonder about what he's capable of.
Trent coaches it, though, right?
Yeah, Trent overrates his guys just a little bit.
Right.
I'll tell him that. I'll tell my friend Trent that.
I mean, I'm just saying he's not going to be like the dudes. Yeah, his arm sucks.
Yeah, but Trent goes overboard is the thing. He called him Marino, right? I mean, that's too much.
That was over the top.
To me, Tua reminds me much of Mariota, not just because they're both Hawaiian, but Mariota, super quick release, doesn't really have crazy velocity on the ball, and I thought that would always come back to bite a little bit.
They both appeared, neither of them has a cannon, but both of them seem to be over the threshold of like marginal. They're both okay.
Well, we'll have more on both of these teams, all 4 of these teams, as we preview Week 7 on Thursday.
Okay, so this was just quickly the Jets-Dolphins thing, right? Miami obviously win that game. Xavier Howard has a great interception.
Really nice play.
But this is like the Dolphins are clearly a better team than the Jets, but nobody had a third down conversion in this game for like most of it. It took until like the end of the third quarter for anybody to convert a third down play. Like Miami jumped back to this massive lead early on, and then it's almost like the ineptitude of the Jets overall just like sank everybody. And eventually, the longer this game went, the more miserable it became for everybody involved. Frank Gore is just trucking one carry after another. It's just, God. But like, Miami, they're not bad overall.
You don't think so?
No. I mean, it's the Jets. So, like I say, the Jets taint everything they touch at this point. Like, everybody, you play down to them. But, like, Miami jumped out to this pretty big lead, commanding early on. They don't look bad.
That's a little bit of what we thought too, though. I mean, they made so many changes on the back end that they should have been able to compete a little bit more defensively than they did last year. And when you there's construction happening at the office here, and when you get into the volatility of your quarterback, Fitzpatrick, sometimes good things happen, sometimes bad things happen. Like, he had some bad things happen in this game, but it didn't matter because you were playing the Jets.
They're 3-3 and have a points differential of plus 47. So even if you throw out the Jets game, they're still way ahead of the Bears.
There you go. Dolphins. Sneaky good this year. Do not sleep on the Dolphins, as I'm not. All right, man. That's it for today.
Yep.
Week
2 more
6,
games.
almost in the books. We have a Chiefs-Bills preview. So we've previewed both games on the preview podcast. So if you're a Chiefs-Bills, Cardinals, or Cowboys fan, go back and watch and listen to the Week 6 preview. Also on YouTube, we have the cutout of that, Chiefs and Bills. But enjoy Monday Night Football.
Huge guest coming later this week. Future Hall of Fame.
Future Hall of Fame guest.
Yes.
One of the best players in PFF history. Do we
In
fully
fact,
tease it? Or
just history, period.
Or in history. But PFF history makes it,
All right.
Well, a guy we have his entire career graded
Yeah.
at an elite level.
Yes.
That's exciting. I cannot wait to talk to. Tune in Thursday for our future Hall of Fame guest. Thanks to everybody for listening. We'll be back Thursday previewing all of the Week 7 action.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.